Okay, looks like we're ready to start. I'd like to welcome you all. This is a panel discussion, history of the Krona Fire Department, and we're going to focus on a specific era. And my name is Wes Speak. I'm president of the Krona Historic Preservation Society, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be standing here today after I think I approached Fred about a year ago with this idea, and he kind of lit up and thought it was a great idea, and he said, I got the perfect guys. And just hearing a little bit from these guys, I think he did. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel, and then I'll introduce our moderator, and then we'll get started. So let's see, first we have retired Fire Captain Steve Van Zandt. Everybody give a round of applause. Retired Fire Captain Richard Hernandez. And retired Fire Chief Bob German. Retired Fire Captain Ralph Davis. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate this. We really see this as a way of preserving, our core values as a society is preserving history, and think that this will be recorded and put on YouTube. Your kids, your grandkids will be able to hear this, and we're excited to hear that. So with that, I'll introduce our moderator, retired Fire Captain Fred Parr.
So what we haven't told you is we also have a double secret surprise guest at the end, and I'm not going to tell you that. So if anybody here knows who that guest speaker is, don't tell your neighbor. We're going to keep it as a surprise. Let me get right to it. My name is Fred Parr. I was hired as a firefighter apprentice with the Krona Fire Department in 1986 and retired as a fire captain in 2014. During the latter half of my career, I also had the honor of serving as the department's historian. Summarizing our department's 119-year history in 10 minutes, which I'm going to try to do here for you before we get to the panel discussion, is a pretty daunting task, but I did realize that we're actually only going to like 1980, so I only have to talk about 82 years in 10 minutes, so not too bad. I also want to apologize for reading off the script. I have to do that. I tried doing it with note cards, and it took like 2.5 hours for me to get through it, so that's why I'm doing that. Today I'm going to get a very quick overview of the history of the Krona Fire Department. Next, like I said, we will have a panel discussion focusing on the years that these gentlemen were here, which was a very, very formative years for the fire department, formative eras where it went from a paid and volunteer department to a real full-time department with policies and procedures and training and all those things that come along with it. So we're going to have that panel discussion, and then we're going to have our special guest speaker. So that's the day. Also a short disclaimer, many folks throughout the history of the fire department have worked to protect the history and written things down and saved things, and I appreciate all of them, and I plagiarized from many of them, so I apologize for that. City of Krona was a growing government and community when the city trustees organized the Krona Fire Department in January of 1898. Benjamin E. Savory was appointed as the first fire chief. I have to believe that the danger of fire back in that day was a real concern, but they did hire the dog catcher before they hired the fire chief. So apparently they had a real big problem with dogs as well. The first Krona Fire Station, number 1, was built at 717 South Main Street at the northeast corner of 8th and Main. Property was purchased from the First Baptist Church across the street. The city purchased the property from the church for $114.50 with a whopping budget of $300 to construct the small hose house, basically, for their new hose cart they were going to buy. We then organized the volunteer firefighters, purchased a hose cart, cost $99.17, fire hose, buckets, started training new volunteers to fight fire. We had ourselves a fire department. The water department was also instructed to put in 6 fire hydrants in the city. Probably not the greatest pressure back then, but they did have 6 fire hydrants, and they were laid from the fire hydrants when they could. You know, the town was a lot smaller, and so we didn't have to go as far, but I'm sure they did a lot of bucket brigades as well, even though they had some fire hose now. That station was also the location for many of Krona's social functions back in those days, and ended up being the city hall, I think, at some point as well. Firefighters arrived and used, oops, I missed something there, sorry. On November 23rd, 1899, a fire started in the second floor, many of you have heard about it, of a hotel, Temescal Hotel. Firefighters arrived and used their hose cart to lay hose from the hydrant and proceeded to fight the fire, and were making some progress until a hay wagon ran over the hose and severed it. This is a story that's been told over and over, and it had a profound effect on the future of the Krona Fire Department, and they came under a lot of serious criticism. Some even reacted that the department be disbanded, since the quote of the day was the firemen arrived in time just to save the lot and never the building. In 1911, local officials wanted to improve both the quality and services and physical appearance of Krona. In October of 1911, a bond measure was approved by voters allowing the construction of the new City Hall building. Improvement of city roads and addition of an engine-powered fire truck, our first engine-powered fire truck. The new City Hall Fire Station Police Station was designed by Leo Krona in the neoclassical design, and was located adjacent to where the first fire station was, and was addressed 719 South Main. In 1912, we purchased our first fire engine, Hartford, $5,750 back then. This necessitated the need for the first-time fire department employee, so this city hired 2 drivers basically to work every other day and drive the new fire engine to the fire and operate the pump and assist the volunteers. He was also the janitor and landscape maintenance at City Hall. Had a little apartment above the City Hall. It's a pretty cool building, if you've seen the picture. The apparatus bay opened up onto 8th Street, and there was a sleeping quarter, small sleeping quarter for the on-duty engineer upstairs. In regard to fire engines, our second fire engine was an Aaron's Fox, and purchased in 1923. It was the last model with a pulsator ball in front of the engine to absorb the shock of the pulsating water pressure. The history and final resting place of our Aaron's Fox is a mystery to this day. It is important to note that this model is one of the most sought-after anti-fire engines, and be worth a fortune today. And if anybody in this room has any knowledge where it is, please see me afterwards, and I'll make it worth your while. Throughout the next couple of decades, we had many vehicles, often repurposed and improvised. In 1944, the city purchased the legendary 1944 Mack fire truck, which is still maintained today as our parade engine and a piece of real living history. In 1950, we're moving pretty fast, Spec Hart was appointed Krona's first full-time professional fire chief. In 1955, Fire Station 1 was moved from City Hall to a newly constructed building at the corner of 10th and Bell. Although Fire Station 1 today is again relocated to Magnolia and Garrison, the old station still stands at 10th and Bell as our senior center. And it's pretty fun to look at the building and picture the apparatus doors coming onto Bell and see the old pictures of it. The opening of the Bell Avenue station was another chapter in the modernization of our fire department. Young Harvey Simpson was a volunteer in 1955. Side note, asked me after the meeting to tell you about the blackball process for becoming a volunteer. That's a pretty wonderful story. Anyway, he was promoted to a permanent full-time firefighter position just a few months after the new station opened. I had the pleasure of sitting down for an oral history interview with him, which was an incredible experience. He explained how he rose through the ranks and eventually made the rank of fire chief. He was primarily the assistant fire chief during the years that we're going to focus on here today. Back to CFD volunteers. They did a selfless and great job protecting our city for all those years until 1972 when the program was finally disbanded. They were civic-minded residents and community leaders. They responded at all hours of the day from home and work. or wherever they were driving when the siren or bell or pager went off, and were compensated only a couple bucks a fire. They had training a couple times a month and did the very best they could with what they had. They were a social bunch and liked to play cards at the firehouse after the training was finished, which apparently is another panel discussion all of its own. During the 74 years that the fire department relied on volunteers, at the sound of a bell, siren, pager, they rushed to selfishly serve and protect our community. So shout out to all the volunteers throughout the year. I don't know how many volunteers there were throughout the years that protected this community, but they did a great job. Okay, so try to stay with me here. We're going to move real fast. In 1965, the citizens of Krona passed a $365,000 bond measure to build the second fire station, make improvements to Station 1, and buy 2 new fire engines. The city was expanding to the north and west with an undivided railroad crossing. The response to the north side of the tracks could be delayed like 20 minutes when the freight train was going through town, so it was really a response problem. City Council had just hired their first prominent city manager, Mr. Glenwood Wilson, I'm sorry. Chief Fred Parr, who had been the fire chief since 1950, had recently retired, and we needed leadership to reshape and build a fire department in a rapidly expanding city. The city recruited for a new fire chief and hired Jim Johnson on July 1st of 1965. He was charged by the city manager not only to open a second fire station on the north side of town, but to chart and build a master plan for the future fire department. He quickly opened a second fire station in the old City Arts Quonset hut on the south side of Harrison, across the street from the current Station 2. That's a whole other talk on its own too. A lot of stories about that process. When hiring for the firefighters for the city's second fire station, Chief Johnson opened up the process to applicants from outside the volunteer ranks. He ended up hiring 8 new firefighters from the volunteers and outside applicants to staff the new station, and I had the privilege of knowing 7 of those. Before that, they always hired directly from the volunteers. This was really the first time that they went outside for firefighters. Chief Johnson was a very resourceful and thrifty man, and made the bond measures funds go for a long way. They were spending those bond monies for years, apparently. He seems to have exceeded the city managers and council's expectations by a long shot. He was an amazing person, and a profile that can be found archived on the CHPS website and our newsletters. I did a profile of him in February of 2015. Nice story about him there. In an early reorganization, Chief Johnson promoted Harvey Simpson. You remember Harvey, who was hired in 1955 as a firefighter. One of the first new firefighters for the brand new Fire Station 1 at Bell. Although the two had both been competing for the chief's job, Harvey had been testing as well, they formed a strong bond and worked well together. They not only planned for the department to provide fire protection for a growing city, but they developed policy, procedure, and structure for the department. I was fortunate to interview them both, and they truly had a mutual affection for one another. All right, I'm sorry, I know this history has been very fast, but let me stay focused here. We have a panel, and I apologize for making you guys sit up there in front of everybody while I did that. But they were all around in the 70s when the department truly started developing into a modern-day professional agency. What we're going to do here today is I have a series of questions. We have 9 questions we're going to try to get through with the panel. I'm going to ask the question one time. I'm going to pass the mic to Captain Van Zandt. We're going to have about 90 seconds per answer. It's pretty fast-paced. That's average. So, along with being the moderator and the sound guy, I'm also the stopwatch guy. So, we have some hand signals that we're going to be doing up here to let them know when they need to wrap it up. But I think we're going to have a really good time, and we're going to get to know these guys, and it's going to be awesome. So, with that said, are we all ready? Okay. So, question 1 is basically just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I came from Long Beach, and my knowledge of Krona started with the fact that my dad was transferred. He was with the Air Force. He transferred to Riverside in 1960. In those days, to get from Long Beach to Riverside, you had to drive right down 6th Street here. So we knew about Mendoza Snow Cone stand at the park, and we knew about the High Spot hamburger stand over here. And that was all I knew until I came over here and played football against Krona High in 1967. And from that point on, I graduated from high school and left and went into service.
I was born here in Krona, so was my wife and my whole family. Matter of fact, my dad was born here in 1912. I went to school here at Kimball, and then I was transferred over to, I started at Washington Elementary. Then I went to Kimball, then I went to Lincoln, then Krona Junior High, and then right here at this high school. We were the last class that graduated from this building here.
Hello, I go by Bob. It says Robert out here, but I prefer Bob. I was born and raised in Krona. I was actually born across the street from where they were talking about the city hall was the old Krona Community Hospital. And ended up going to school here at Jefferson and St. Edward School, and then graduated from Krona High School. And I lived just a couple of blocks from what was Station 1 at 10th and Bell. So that's kind of where my interest first started, was knowing those guys are over there and trying to keep an eye on what they were doing. But I'll get into my other background as we proceed on here.
Hello, my name is Ralph Davis. You'll hear some people call me Elvin. That's my middle name. I was born and raised, actually, I was born in North Krona. Anybody know where that is? And we moved into Krona in 1946. I grew up behind this, where Jerry's Breaking Mill is down the street here. That was my dad's service station. And then I graduated from here, Krona High School, got married at a young age. My wife was a cradle robber. Had a service station myself for a while. I worked at Wiley Laboratory for 6 years. Aerospace program started declining, and Ray Russell got my wife got Ray Russell to get me to join the fire department. I got involved with volunteers, and here we are.
Thank you, Ralph. All right, do they deserve a second question? What do you think? Is that good enough? Okay. Question number 2, how did you decide to become a firefighter? And what was the process for getting hired?
Well, I got out of the service in 1971. The Vietnam War was winding down, and there was a lot of vets coming home. There was kind of a recession going on. There weren't many jobs. So the first thing you did was went to the unemployment office, and you got a counselor there. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm thinking about the trades. He says, do you ever think about being a firefighter? I said, I am right now. He said, well, Krona is hiring. Why don't you go over there and apply? So that's how I came, went through the testing, interview process, and the rest is history.
About 1968, when my daughter was born, I was working at this place, but I felt there was no purpose in my life. So I felt a calling of giving back. I was born and raised here, like I said earlier. So I decided, why not try the fire department? But I also knew, because some local Latino friends of mine had tried to get into the fire department, and they had a height requirement of 5'10". So I decided, well, I'm going to go take RC. I'm going to RCC, take some fire science classes anyway, and see what happens. So at 69, they relaxed that height to 5'8". So I submitted an interest card. I got interviewed. I became what they call a call firefighter in, I think it was March of 1970. A year and a half later, I became a full-time firefighter. Yeah, that was July the 12th, 1971.
My career started a little bit differently. I was attending college for electrical engineering, and had been mentioned to my household that there was a program at the fire department for fire cadet position. And it was a position that was created for college students. They'd go to school in the day, and then they would dispatch at night. And I thought, well, that might be pretty interesting. I'll go ahead and do that. Earn some money while I'm going to college. Well, as I was going to college and doing the dispatching job, I discovered that this fire department job actually looks like a great career. There's a lot of reward in that. And at the same time, the electrical engineering field was being flooded with people from the space program that were going to be out there working, and I was going to be competing against these folks with many, many years experience. After giving it some thought, I thought the fire department does really look good, so I went ahead and started to work with the fire department. Actually, my first day was my 18th birthday, and I couldn't start before that. I interviewed with Simpson, and he said, "No, you can't start until you're 18." And so I did that, and as time went on, really found that the fire department was where I wanted to be. And the program that I was involved in, the cadet program, then graduated into what was known as the Apprentice Program. That's how my career with the fire department started.
Well, my career started a little bit differently. As I said before, I was working in aerospace. And Ray Russell actually got me an appointment at Harvey Simpson's house. I was interviewed in his living room. And through that process, I got my application and became a volunteer. The city said, "We're not hiring anybody." They froze hiring, but then two gentlemen had to retire, so they picked up me and another guy. So I was actually a volunteer for less than a year. I was picked up, started academy September 29th, 1969.
Awesome, thank you, gentlemen. Please describe your rookie year and kind of what that looked like.
Well, when you're the new guy, it's pretty tough, especially if you're a PEF employee, which is similar to the Civic program. Several of us were hired on that program, and it was funded in almost like a monthly thing. So not only do we have to meet all the requirements of probation and the harassment and stuff that goes with being the new guy, but we also were sweating out the next paycheck and making sure that we were going to get funded for another 3 or 4 months. Chief Johnson helped us out with that. We started at lower than starting firefighters pay, and he brought us all up to starting firefighters pay from our day one. So all of our anniversary dates and all that stuff worked really well. Again, that was something that Johnson did, looking out for his guys. So the first year was a little bit rough, but after that we got assured that we had permanent jobs, and again we just moved on from there.
When I first got hired, I assigned to the Senior Center, Fire Station 1. Our shift started at 6 p.m., so it was from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m., which was kind of odd. It's the only department around the area that worked those hours. First time I slept in the dorm, no air conditioner. We had a place right next door, Panther's Den, maybe some
Teenage parties. And every weekend there was no sleep for us because all the music coming through the windows and stuff. That same year, we had a lot of calls, and we were the station that was in charge of cleaning and drying hoses. So we did a lot of that. One of the things I remember from there, we did have a major disturbance just down a few blocks from here. It was a hot Labor Day weekend. We got called and there was trash fires all over. I was on the hose putting out the fire in the street, and we got pelted with rocks and bottles and so forth and so forth. Anyway, we exited there, and then about 3 hours later, we were sent back with policemen on our tailboards with shotguns. We spent the whole night putting out fires in that neighborhood, and it was quite a long night. So I remember that. After that, in January, I went to the Fire Academy for 9 weeks, and then I got reassigned to Station 2. A lot of calls down there, a lot of training, and that was the first time I worked my first Christmas, many Christmases, and New Year's. I worked on that year.
My rookie year was an interesting year. Again, I started out as a dispatcher, and it wasn't really what you would think of as a firefighter's position. But I did work in the fire station at 10th and Bell, and got to get involved in a lot of the activities that Richard has described as well, with testing hose, because you weren't just a dispatcher, you were everything else that they needed done around the station, whether it was janitor work, maintenance work, all those different kinds of things that were just necessary. But during my rookie year, I did really learn a lot about the city and about how the fire department operated, and it just reinforced my decision of why I wanted to be there.
My first year, I was very fortunate. I was assigned to Captain Bill Lucas. And we had very intense training on his shift. I learned very much, and I credit him with a lot of stuff, a lot of my success in my career. We just trained constantly. And I was on a bill shift for probably a year and a few months, and then I was reassigned to Station 1.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, we have spoken, or I have spoken about the mission that Chief Johnson was given to build and professionalize the fire department. What is your memory of Chief Johnson in general and in this regard?
Well, Chief Johnson was a firefighter. Chief Johnson had scars on his neck and the tops of his ear burned out from pulling the crew out of a fire. So he wasn't somebody that sat behind a desk. Chief Johnson would come out, take the hose out of your hand, and fight fire in his white shoes and his Hawaiian shirt. Chief Johnson took care of the guys that sometimes we didn't realize what he was doing for us, but he really did, as I said before, took care of everyone and had the best interests of not only the guys, but the department and the city at heart.
What I remember is we were getting a lot of training in both the classroom. We had state certified classes, hose drills, hot drills. Chief Johnson was responsible for all that. He gave us a great skills and experience in our role as firefighters. That's what I remember about him.
Chief Johnson was a very creative leader. As you noticed earlier, or heard earlier in some of the discussion, he was given an assignment to professionalize and improve the organization. And he did that in many ways, and some of those areas that he developed in was in terms of communications, back to the dispatching thing. He was very dedicated to making sure that the city had good communications with their fire apparatus, and was also involved in the police department's communications as well. And in that regard, he did a lot to advance the city's abilities. Another thing that I remember about Chief Johnson is his creativity when it came to getting things done, getting things to happen in terms of new fire equipment or rebuilding old fire equipment and making it more serviceable for the future. The cost of fire equipment even then was still quite prohibitive, and he came up with ways to get older equipment repowered, repainted, and repurposed, and made it go on for many, many more years service than what would have otherwise been expected. And he always had our backs, as Steve said. It was good to work for him, knowing that he was going to be there for you.
Well, what can I add to this? My view of Chief Johnson, and I didn't really realize it when I first started here, but as years went by, I found him to be very progressive. We had very up-to-date equipment compared to a lot of other fire departments. We were way ahead of the surrounding cities in breathing apparatus when we used them. We were just very well equipped.
Thank you. Yeah, I had the chance to interview Chief Johnson. He really is a remarkable individual, and hearing about when he got burned working for the State Department of Forestry, it had a different name back then, but there was 5 fire engines in Orange County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County. I mean, they would be going all over every single day on these fires, and yeah, that was a bad one. He was in the hospital of 3rd-degree and 2nd-degree burns on his arms and face. Looked horrible. So 3 months in the hospital. He was back in the office in 4 months, and back on the fire engine in 6. People couldn't recognize him. Yeah. Okay, let's move to Chief Simpson. During most or virtually all of Chief Johnson's tenure as fire chief, Chief Simpson was his assistant fire chief, later became our fire chief before he retired. So, what is your experience and memory of Fire Chief Johnson, or Simpson, who still lives right around the corner? I talked to him yesterday. And what do you believe was his biggest accomplishment in the development of the modern fire department?
Chief Simpson was the personnel guy for the department. He was a money guy. Chief Johnson could go out and close the deal, and Chief Simpson was the guy that was keeping everything back at the house cleaned up. They worked really well together that way. Chief Simpson was also kind of like your dad. If you got in a little bit of trouble, you had to talk, and then it was over with. It was forgotten, and you moved on. There was no hard feelings or. And Chief Simpson, if he had a fault, it was that he thought everyone was as loyal to the fire department as he was. He was really, really part of what made the department what it is today.
Well, as Steve said, yeah, Chief Simpson was in charge of personnel. He kept everyone in line. What I remember, he was always making sure that everyone did their job in a professional way. That was Chief Simpson.
My memories of Chief Simpson are that he was probably one of the most dedicated people you would ever find to an organization. He was always working hard for the department, always keeping things in order, always watching out for the people that worked for him and worked in the organization. He was the kind of guy that would be there whenever you needed some advice, at least for me anyway. I always appreciated having the opportunity to talk with him. Some of the roles in my career kind of followed what Chief Simpson was involved with in his career, and he guided me and mentored me in many, many ways throughout that career, and it was a huge assistance for me.
Well, Chief Simpson was just very professional. He handled the nuts and bolts of the department. And to us, off duty he was Harvey, on duty he was Chief Simpson. And he did a good job running the department for a lot of years.
All right, thank you all. Okay, I have a couple specific questions here for you. First one, what was the biggest change or development within your career that provided the biggest benefit to the fire service?
Oh, by far, that would be training and education. When we all started, the guys sitting up here and some of the old timers out in the audience, there wasn't a whole lot of training. We were lucky to have first aid training. We all became EMTs, and we went into all kinds of specialized training, high and low angle rescue and trench rescue, everything that the guys are facing today. We finally got exposed to it early on and kind of helped bring that along. But I think training and education is the most important.
Well, I remember a lot of different things that developments that came about. The jaws of life, when we got that was a big change. We just had these little tools to try to break this car apart. And also the hazardous materials team, when we got that going, that was helpful. Four-man truck company, we used to have just a one-man truck company, the driver, and that was it. So that was a big change. But the biggest change, I think, in my opinion, since when I was a firefighter, was the paramedic program. When we got that, boy, that really gave a medical expertise to the fire department and really did a lot for the community. And they still have paramedics on the engines right now.
Well, Richard actually hit on two subjects that I was going to talk about as well. The first one being the medical response within the fire service. When I first started here, all that was on an engine was a first aid kit and a resuscitator. And the main reason that resuscitator was there was not for the community, but for any firefighters that might have gone down during an event. As time went on, the community learned that if the fire department carries that around, maybe we can use that in town. And that was the beginning, from my perspective, of when the medical response for Krona began. And as was mentioned, we then got training as EMTs. Paramedics came to the community, and I think that was a major, major impact on the fire service. And will continue to be a huge part of the service for many, many, and all the years to come. The other topic that Richard touched on was also the hazardous materials response. Years ago, hazardous materials for us was get the hose out, hose it down into the drain, and everybody go home. Obviously, that was not probably the best option. And as time went on, the organization developed a hazardous materials response team. We became much more skilled at dealing with all the different things, the chemicals, the gasoline that was on the streets, all the different types of dangerous products that were out there. And I think that had a huge impact on the fire service.
Well, for me, I think the biggest impact is when we actually started getting formal CPR training, and then later on, formal EMT training. That made a big difference in our ability to help the citizens of Krona.
Right. One person said the development of report writing. Am I the only one that loved doing that? Thought that was a really great thing that we invented, data collection? Sorry. Okay. Another specific question. What is the most memorable incident of your career? Top 3 maybe, if you have to.
Well, in a 31-year career, it's kind of hard to pin one down. There were quite a few that were exciting and thrilling, and there were some other ones that were kind of heartbreakers. SIDS deaths are no fun. Infant drownings are no fun. Children hit by cars are no fun, but it's all stuff that you do. And so a lot of those incidents had nothing to do with the big flames and the smoke and all that. It was interesting to go to the riots in Los Angeles after the Rodney King verdict. And so that was driving into where it looked like truly what everybody always says, a war zone. It looked like that. So that was interesting, but it probably wasn't as exciting as some of the wildland fires. It's just, you know, I can't pin it down to one particular incident.
I actually have around 3 of them that I can remember, but I'll just cover one. It was January the 1st, New Year's Day, at 2 a.m. in the morning. We got a call of a palm tree fire. Wanted to respond out of Station 1 on Magnolia. When we were en route, we couldn't see any glow, nothing in the sky. Usually you look for that. No smoke. And this was on Main Street. And as we're arriving, still we couldn't see anything. But when we arrived, what I had was, and by the way, it was only 3 of us on the engine. When I arrived, we had a 2-story structure, full involved, a detached garage, also burning, 2 palm trees, and a neighbor's roof just starting to burn. I immediately called for a structure response. We needed help. When I got off, I encountered this person, totally black. Their hair was completely burned. Skin was coming from her face and arms, and in shock. She told me, I asked her, is everybody out? She told me her grandma was trapped inside, near the front door. So we got her aside. The fireman finally got over here to me because we were laying in line trying to get some water. We went ahead and advanced the line into through a window that was broken and then to the left of the front door, and just to hold the fire at bay so it wouldn't burn this person that was down just outside the front door, because the flames were just coming and impeding on her. So that was our assignment. That's all we could do at the time. We couldn't get to her because there was some security doors and we couldn't break them. So when the firefighters arrived, the other engines arrived, that was their assignment that I gave them to get to this woman and get her out of there, which is what they did. Then the firemen advanced lines into the house, and shortly after we had a roof collapse. 5 firefighters were hurt. 4 were treated on scene. 1 was sent to the hospital. Afterwards, when we decided to back off and go defensive. Surround and drown is what we call it. That fire, there was a total of 3 people burned, and 8 months later, the one that was that we rescued passed away from smoke poisoning. So that's one of the ones that I remember.
Well, as the other interviewees have mentioned, there are always lots of different incidents that we respond to that are memorable. There's 2 in particular that stuck out with me. The first one was early in my career. I was working at Station 1 when we got called out to a traffic accident on the 91 freeway. Back in those days, I don't know if any of you remember much or not, but we used to get some really heavy ground fogs in the Krona area. And this incident ended up involving almost 50 vehicles, multiple fires within the crash. You could drive up to within probably 10 or 15 yards of a totally involved vehicle and not even see it. The fog was that thick. That was an incident that really stood out for me, and I've always remembered is just how many people were involved, how many vehicles were involved. But fortunately, we didn't have any fatalities in that day. We've had other incidents since then, or we had other incidents years following, where we did have suffer some fatalities in these large fog-related incidents. But that's the first one that stood out for me. The second one that stood out for me was not actually in Krona. It was just very near to Krona in the Chino Hills area. We got a call one morning that there was a small plane crash in the Chino Hills. And that was the incident where we lost 4 of our brilliant young men in a plane crash. That impacted the department and the community in ways I never would have imagined. The community's support, sympathy that was expressed was overwhelming for us. It was something that I'll never ever forget. And I will never ever forget those 4 gentlemen that perished that morning. All great young firefighters and on their way to a fantastic career.
Well, like they all say, it's a lot of memorable responses we've been on, but I guess the most memorable, one of the most memorable ones, I was working at Station 2, another one of those foggy mornings, and we responded eastbound 91 out towards the canyon, out towards 71, and each time we come up to the car, fairly serious accident, they kept waving us on. And we must have gone down a half mile. There'd been 113 cars in an accident. We stopped, and this trailer had actually gone on the roof and mashed the roof. The guy was still down inside the cab. So we had to cut the roof off the truck. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. So I'm trying to cover the guy up with a blanket that they handed me, and out comes his hand. He grabbed the blanket and covered himself. We got the guy cut out of there, and he had minor injuries, which is absolutely amazing. It's a fact, I don't know how many foggy accidents we had out there during those years, but there was 113 cars in this particular accident.
Thank you all. Looking back at all your years in the department, who are the people that stand out to you as making the biggest impact or influence on you?
Well, we've already talked about Chief Johnson and Chief Simpson, but a lot of the guys that you see sitting out in the audience here are the same guys that were kind of our leaders. And when we were coming up, Captain McDonald's out there. He's so old, he took me on my first code 3 run. Learned a lot about Captain McDonald working for him many years. You don't get any phone calls at lunchtime, dinner's at 5. Those are all important rules. And a lot of the early captains that I worked for were mentors and trainers and guys that I really tried to develop my style and follow them.
The one firefighter who had the most impact on me was Captain Blue, because I worked for him probably 4 or 5 years. He was a walking encyclopedia. He knew everything about the fire department. His door was always open. If you had a question, no matter what time of the day, at night, he would stop, either verbally explain the question that you had, answered it, or he'd use a board to do it. Sometimes he'd even take me outside if I had a question on the fire engine, and we'd get underneath the fire engine and show me how it works and stuff. So he was remarkable. Everybody really thought highly of him. When we went on calls, I was so confident that we could take care of just about anything, and we did. He was really, really something. He built a foundation for my career, and I credit him a lot. He just reminded me, he also made a great lasagna. And just a note, he knew that us as
Christmas, so he asked me one time that, hey, let's make tamales. So sure enough, I asked my mom for the recipe and so forth, and she helped me out and stuff. So for the first time in the Krona Fire Department, we made tamales at Fire Station 2. Him and I stayed up the whole night. The other guys, you know, they were all wrapping the tamales and doing this. They went to bed because now we had to cook them. So Captain Lucas and I stayed up and tasted them. Anyway, Captain Lucas passed away in 1975 from occupational cancer. Yeah, but he was a great guy.
Well, as has been mentioned before, Harvey Simpson had a big impact on my career, and I respect him greatly for his dedication and the guidance he gave me. I had an opportunity to work with him in administration for many, many years, and a lot of the things that I was able to carry on throughout the rest of my career were great. The information that I got from him, and just observing him and the way he handled himself as a professional, a career professional, was what was probably the biggest influence for me.
Well, these guys are kind of robbing my thunder there because I attribute Bill with this really been a positive aspect of my career. Another instructor I had at Chief College, his name was Ed Smith. He was very helpful to many guys' careers. He was a great instructor.
Perfect, perfect, wonderful people. All right, could be a fun one, I don't know. What advice would you give to a rookie firefighter who's starting in 2018?
I've had the chance to help some young men come in, young folks, young men and women come into the fire service, and my first statement to them is if you really truly want this job, it's going to take you at least 5 years to get the job. And if you think you're going to waltz in here like some of us did and get the job just by showing up and filling out an application these days, that's not going to work. So you got to almost start in high school and get a background in math and science, and you can try and get some first aid classes and go from there. And once you do get started, you're never going to be done training and going to school. It's going to continue and continue your entire career.
I would tell them that firefighting is a dangerous profession. You go fight many types of fires, structures, down aircraft, railroad accidents, just about anything. The public seems to, they have a problem and they call the fire department. So you got to be an expert at everything. You're a doctor one day, you're a construction worker the next day, you're a medical expert the next day. Anyway, so train a lot. But you'll never get used to, people ask me, how do you guys get used to seeing all that carnage that you see? You never get used to it. I would also remind them or tell them that when the alarm rings, the adrenaline will go up. That's normal. Just be calm. Follow the captain's orders when you arrive on scene. Stay close to your brothers. They'll take care of you. They won't put you in harm's way. Be safe and come back at the end of the shift.
Well, Steve and Richard have covered a lot of what I would give them as advice, but I would also advise them to continue on with their formal education as well. There's always more to be learned. All of us at this table continued on with our educations long after we got hired. The education doesn't end once you get that job. It continues on until the day you retire. So always make sure you take advantage of the opportunities that you get for training and education, and also listen to those folks that have been around for a while. They actually do know something.
Well, that's kind of my answer too. Listen to the old guys. And keep another thing in mind, you're becoming a member of a brotherhood. And the other thing is, like these guys said, you never stop going to school. Got to have the right attitude and just stay with it. On the down days you feel down, just stay with it.
All right, let's take a quick break and give them a round of applause because that was pretty awesome. I'm so excited now, it almost makes me want to go back to work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little round robin and questions from the audience. So you have anybody have a question? Raise your hand. Anybody like to ask a question of the group? Go ahead.
So I know you have to take turns cooking at the station, so which of the four of you is the best cook?
Richard, is that the consensus? All right, who else has a question? Come on, good fire department question. Somebody's got to have a question, huh? Okay.
How do the shifts work? Do you guys stay the nights at your fire station? Do like a whole 24-hour shift, then off and then on kind of thing? Is that how it works?
Yes,
Go ahead.
it's a 24-hour shift. Nowadays, it starts at 8 in the morning till the following day at 8 in the morning.
Okay.
A lot of people you see on TV, firemen sitting around waiting for a fire. It doesn't work that way. We had daily assignments. The station is like a house. There's certain days that you mop the floors, wax the furniture, clean the windows. All that stuff has to get done. And that's in between the calls that you go to. At night, there's a lot of self-training by yourself, or the captain takes you out and just pulls drills with you in the backyard. There's all kinds of things going. We're always busy. And someone mentioned here the education, it never stops. The last day that I worked after almost 32 years of fighting fires, I was in a classroom. My last day, still learning.
All right, anybody else have a question?
Hi, I'm Richard's daughter, and I know that my dad was the first Hispanic fireman in the city, so I just wanted to recognize that. How did that feel, Dad?
Actually, there was one other before me, years passed, and he left the department for some reason, I don't know. That was the reason I never even thought of that. The newspaper brought it up in an article, I guess, and so people started talking to me about that. But I did mentor a lot of Hispanics that came behind me. And a friend of mine did tell me that you're going to be a teacher. You're going to teach not only the new Hispanics coming in, but also the Anglos that are in the department now. That anybody can do this job. No matter what their nationality is. So.
First Hispanic fire captain, right?
First engineer, first captain.
First, through the promotions as well. Any other questions?
I have one more. How do these guys put up with the snoring?
Can I please answer that question?
Yes,
At Station 1, I worked with Dave Reed, Joe Bridges, and Richard Hernandez. I positioned my bed so I could check their beds all night long.
All right, any other questions? Vicki Parr.
I know the public likes to bring cookies to fire stations, but what do you boys think is the best way the public can thank you or honor you?
Wow. How can the public show their appreciation to firefighters? Anybody want to answer that?
Well, I think most of us would say we have one of the best jobs in the world, and you guys providing us a place to do our job is probably thank you enough.
I think the public does very good. Thank you. Mr. Wynn?
I'd like to know from each firefighter up there what their favorite piece of fire apparatus would be.
That's a good one. Favorite piece of fire apparatus? And their entire career, one? Are you going to limit it to one?
No, they can use as many as they like.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we're going to limit it to one. Steve's got to come in.
Well, we talked about Chief Johnson being kind of a scrounger. A long time ago, he brought 3 5-ton military trucks to the department, and we made water tenders out of them. And they weren't pretty, and they didn't run that well, but they could go just about any place you have the nerve to drive them. And they may not be everyone's favorite, but it was a pretty neat piece of equipment to take out and fight fire with.
My favorite ones were probably the first engine that, when I met engineer, I was driving a 1966 Van Peltz. Reason being, that was the last ones that were stick shift, and you also had split shift, so you could actually use about 10 shifts as you're going down the street, go 3. So that was fun to drive those things. And then after that, we got automatics. We thought we'd die and went to heaven.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Steve on the old water tenders that Chief Johnson was responsible for us getting. You can drive those things anywhere. They would climb a wall almost if you made a decision to try it out. And that might even be partially responsible for the reason I got involved in off-roading later in my life.
Well, I'm a little different. I used to love to drive the snorkel. A little bit of practice, you could drive with even not using the clutch. And I didn't like the automatics. On a wildland fire, you could roll a pump, maintain pressure with a stick shift. You could not do that with an automatic.
Well, thank you. Okay, I have 2 more questions. First one is 2.5 pre-connect with the bundles. What's the engine pressure? What is it? 130. 130, all right. Ralph?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. That's impressive. Okay, final question for you gentlemen. Looking back at your time on the fire department, considering the Firemen's Association, the group outside the department, give us your perspective on the importance of the association throughout your career and the fellowship and brotherhood of the guys that you work with.
Well, the association was kind of the glue that held everyone together. Our negotiations with the city were through the association in the early days, and the association was responsible for such things as a fireman's wall, which probably would be illegal if we tried to do those today. And one of the things that the association did some years ago was they brought the Krona Firefighters Vehicle Rescue School to town. That now is internationally known. It still goes on every year in April. And the city of Krona and the fire department and the association are very well known for that event.
You had to ask about the Fire Association. I could talk about the Fire Association for hours. I was quite involved. I started first as secretary, then as treasurer. Then I became president. Then I backed away from president to give someone else a chance. Then they only lasted a year. I went back to president. And then we decided to get involved with politics. So I became the Pac-Man. So that went on for many years. But the the Fire Association, a lot of people say that the fire department is the association is fire department. They don't. There's no difference. But we did do a lot for the community. The Fireman's Ball, the Elder Education, we supported a lot of teams here, girls softball, little leagues, all kinds of things. Burn Foundation, we did a lot for children mainly. But real busy, real involved with the community.
My memories of the association are all good. When I first started, the association was more of a social group, and it was responsible for a lot of different activities that brought the families together. And we talk about our fire service family, but that also includes the wives and the children and all the rest, and the association played a big part in bringing all of us together as one big family. But it did grow over the years, and it did become more involved in good ways. It became involved in charitable events, supporting different youth organizations, and continued on and became also more involved in our representation with the city and did a very good job at that. And I'm very proud of what the association was and is today.
Well, the association was responsible for my being established with my own personal soapbox. That's another story in itself, and we'll go there. I think the association just solidifies the brotherhood that we belong to. Today, the association is very, very strong. When we became politically involved, prior to that, we had kind of an adversarial relationship with the city and the city management. And when we became political, initially through California State Firefighters Association with their help and guidance, we developed a positive relationship with the city and with the council. And I think that's still maintained today.
All right, let's give them one more round of applause. All right, thanks, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you to stay up here. My job's going to be over here in a minute, and I need you to kind of keep track of our special guest and make sure we stay on track, okay? All right. So our special guest today, I was thinking for the last period of time how to write the introduction, and I got nothing. He's an amazing person and community member and a knower of all things fire department, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. I asked him to give us some perspective on his memories growing up in Krona or growing up around the Krona Fire Department and what he saw. Tell us about who he is, obviously, and then and to give us his perspective on the 60s and 70s and this era we're talking about. So please give a round of applause to Mr. Ray Russell.
I'd first like to say something about these four gentlemen up here. I've been involved with them for I don't know how many years. He and I have done some fantastic rescues. I was with the county fire, he was with the city. Richard and I have been around a long time together. I'm going to skip Bob. Ellen was in my wedding. His wife was my bridesmaid, or his wife was my wife's bridesmaid. And the reason I talked to him in the fire service was because he kept calling me and telling me, would you please come down here and try to talk me into being a fireman. So I did. Him and a friend of mine named Pat Ware and a guy named Charlie Cena, who Chief Johnson never forgave me for, by the way. A long story. Coming back to Bob, Bob is a relative. If you marry into the German family in Krona, you have a lot of relatives. And, I was so proud of him when he made deputy chief because he was part of our family. And actually, we had 3 members of our family who were in the fire service. It was Bob and no, in the Krona Fire Department.
Bill Lucas was a relation.
Yeah, Bill Lucas, and I'm going to mention Bill Lucas here in a minute. And Freddie Zabel. We're all relatives. They were captain. I want to talk about Bill Lucas a little bit. I love Bill Lucas. He was a great guy. He was my wife's uncle, so he was my uncle. His helmet's over there on the table, the yellow ones. I had to buy that from Jim Johnson. He wouldn't give it to me. Bill was the first firefighter in the Krona Fire Department to die in the line of duty. And it was a real shock to our family. Bill and a man named Ted Matthews, whose wife is here, in those days, which was the Spec Hart days, were actually the unofficial leaders of the Krona Fire Department. And nothing really happened unless those two said it was okay. They were just fantastic people, and they both passed away in a very short time with each other. I was supposed to talk about Jim Johnson and Harvey Simpson. Jim Johnson and I were very close. He was in the Division of Forestry in San Bernardino, and I was a young engineer. And Jim Johnson's value to the fire service was he was in charge of dispatch, and he was also in charge of all the purchasing for San Bernardino County Fire and the California Division of Forestry. He was also a battalion chief. When I went to the Bloomington Fire District, which was a contract district, he was our battalion chief for the Bloomington Fire District, so we had a great time together. And when he came to Krona, when I saw his name was on the list, I thought this is really going to be great. And some of the things he did that I thought were really neat is he kind of got everybody together again and kind of made the chief a real chief's job. And he bought the 2 band pelts, and they were white. Everybody went, oh, I can't have white band. And he just redesigned the badge. And I'll never forget that because I kidded him about that for a long time because it has a phoenix up on the top of it and they're still wearing it today, the badge. So Jim is still alive, he's over in heaven. And he was just a great guy. And I would go to fires periodically with him just because they were in the neighborhood. And I'd always stand next to him and he'd always say, no, my guys are going to do this and my guys are going to do that. And it's going to go out. Every fire he went to was always put out, so it was a good deal. He was just a good man. Harvey Simpson, I got to know Harvey when he was a young firefighter here in Krona. And Harvey was one of the only people in the department at the time that was taking community college courses in fire science. So when Jim Johnson decided to create a number 2 position in the department, he created a battalion chief position. And Harvey was appointed to that position from being an engineer, which made a few people angry in the fire department, as you guys will remember. In fact, over there on the table, that white helmet with the battalion chief on it, that was Harvey Simpson's helmet. And Harvey still lives in Krona, over on the east side. And I see him every once in a while just kind of stop at his house and shoot the breeze with him. When Harvey was made assistant chief, and I'm not sure, did Johnson do that? Or was that Johnson that made assistant chief? Yeah.
Yes.
When Johnson left, we had a couple of fire chiefs that came to Krona that weren't, I guess you'd call them the kind of guys that wanted to use Krona as a stepping stone. And Krona was a pretty well-known fire department and it was very progressive. And so if you came from Krona Fire Department, you could probably move on into another fire department and be revered. In fact, we lost a lot of guys in the Krona Fire Department, moved up to LA City and LA County and some of the other cities down in Orange County and whatnot, because they were from Krona, and Krona had a heck of a reputation. When the last chief before Harvey qualified as the fire chief, I found out some things. I want to digress a second. My job in the fire service was I was the assistant chief in charge of state fire training for 18 southern counties. So I pretty much knew a lot of people. We put on a lot of classes in Krona. We burned a lot of houses. Some of them we weren't supposed to, but we didn't do auto extrication and a few other things. So Harvey was just a great guy, and I thought he should be the chief. And they were going to hire this guy who was from Marysville, and I knew him. And he was a guy will gear loose. So I got some information from the Marysville Fire Department, and they sent me newspaper articles about the guy. And I took him to the city manager, and I said, you do not want to hire this guy. And he says, well, I'm going to have to do the testing all over again. I said, no, you're not. Pin that badge on Harvey. So I remember coming home from an oil fire school. That was Friday. And the oil fire school was in Bishop, and it was 2 days, and I was running it. Came home on Sunday. And my wife said to me, as I walked in the door, she said, there's a phone call for you, it's Harvey. This was so cool. And you know, she had let me see that newspaper a second. She was on the phone, and I picked up the phone, and she's holding up the phone, paper, and there was a picture of Harvey getting the badge pinned on by Jim Wheaton. And I said, wow. So, let me get one of these, okay? Anyhow, Harvey was only fire chief for a year, and he did, like guys said, he did magical things. And this really was just a great fire chief. I wish he would have stayed a little bit longer. And then we started getting some pretty good fire chiefs after that, and the last 2 we had were really great. The one we have right now, Duffy, I'm really tickled with Duffy, because I was a volunteer fire captain with the county of Riverside, along with being a paid officer. And Duffy was one of my firefighters for 4 years before he became a Krona firefighter. And boy, he moved up, and he was doing a great job, and I work with him all the time now on this Krona Fire Foundation, Krona Fire Safety Foundation. And so I've been involved with the Krona Fire Department a lot of stuff. I think by way of history, I was fortunate in that I got to sit with Pro Glass for 2 different 2-hour segments. Pro Glass was the chief of the Krona Fire Department for many, many years. Way back when the Polk fire engine was here, and when the Aaron's Fox fire engine was here. And he gave me information that this was phenomenal. And I have a really good memory, so I remember most of what he told me. We did it twice. We had sandwiches and lemonade on his front porch on 8th Street. You really lived down there?
Over 50 years on the fire department. Over 50 years on the fire department.
Yeah, so he was a great guy, and I got a lot from him. But the other one I want to tell you a quick story that happened. We talked about incidents that happened in Krona, and this was a great incident, a great day of incident. There was a fellow here in town named Ralph Covington. How many of you guys remember Ralph Covington? He had a big bright red cherry spot on his face here, a birthmark, you know? He worked at Safeway, he was in the meat market. Well, he was in Rotary with me, and one night we started talking about the Krona Fire Department. And he said, yeah, he said, I was never a fireman, but I lived across the street from the fire station in Old City Hall. And also, when they had the little fire station with a bell on top of it. So when the bell would ring, he would go down and watch the guys show up on bicycles and horses and whatnot and grab the equipment and go to fires. So one particular day, the bell rang, it was a Sunday, and he went down to the fire station, and the first group of guys that came in got on the Pope fire truck, which was a chemical hose wagon, and they responded to a fire at one of the churches. And while that fire was going on, a fire occurred in a single-family dwelling right there in downtown Krona. And so the rest of the guys, they rang the bell again, the rest of the guys came, and they got the hose cart. The hose cart was still in service. They responded with the hose cart to the house fire. And then there was a fire at the same time at the Ford Motor dealership, which was right downtown. So they rang the bell again. By this time, the Simpsons in town are coming. Now they still have, if you look over at the table there, there's a fire bucket that they had 30 of those hanging in the fire station, always full of water. So everybody grabbed a bucket, went to the Ford dealership, put the fire out there. So we had 3 fires in one day. I thought that was, and using the pole, the hose wagon, and the buckets, which was the mainstay of it. He also said that whenever the siren would ring, they had a siren on top of City Hall for a long time, and they also had a red light downtown, and when that red light blinked, all the volunteers had to respond to the station. But they heard the siren too. You picked up the phone and you gave the operator a code. What was it? July 4th. I used to do it all the time. I had the siren call July 4th. I wait till everybody else calls and I call July 1st, and then I go see what the fire was. So they had just a lot of things that were going on in the city, and it was building. The city was building, and sometimes the fire service didn't stay in touch with it until the time they finally bought this old fire engine called an Aaron's Fox, and I brought a model of that for my collection. And the Aaron's Fox was a kind of an expensive fire engine. Like he said, today it would be worth probably $1 million if you had it. And that old fire engine had 12 cylinders on it. And Fred, guy that was talking about before, Ralph Covington. Ralph said that when the siren would go off, he would go to the fire station, and the hood was always open on the Aaron's Fox. And they had to put a shot of gasoline in each cylinder and shut it before they could start it. He said that was his favorite thing to do, was watch him start the Aaron's Fox. So I would like to say about what Krona Fire Department I think is going to happen in the future. I think we're going to get, we've already got some of the best equipment you can ever have. Jim Johnson bought the first ladder truck, which was the 85-foot snorkel. And I think little by little, we're going to get over the budget problems that we have. And Krona Fire Department will just continue to grow. And we got great people in it. And I think it's just a great fire department. And I was glad to be involved some way or another the whole time I've been in the fire service.
So I need a really good question from the panel to Ray. From the panel, payback time. Who has a question for Ray?
None of my questions have been answered. They can't ask me all the questions because the statute of limitations are over.
Any questions from the audience for Ray? Before we thank him?
I would like to know a shareable prank that happened.
Yes.
A prank.
that was pulled, a fire break.
Oh, she would like you to share your favorite prank that was done in the fire service. Prank, joke.
Right? What was that?
That's harder than the big incident.
Yeah, we didn't ever play pranks on anybody in the fire service. But I do remember one that it could have been disastrous. We had a young firefighter at Krona. I was a seasonal firefighter in the Division of Forestry on 1st Street, 1st and Hamner, station's still there. And I was one of the first firefighters that worked in that new station. And we had to dig a pit for a gas tank, and it was in decomposed granite. And decomposed granite, as you know, is very hard to dig in. So we sent this one kid, by the way, his name was Duffy, and there's no relation to the chief today. His dad was the fire chief of March Air Force Base. We call him the Gold Nugget. So anyhow, he just kind of didn't do things right. But anyhow, the foreman of the station, was captain, said, I want you to go out and dig that pit. Here's how big I want it, and here's how deep I want it. So he went out there, and he dug all day and dug that much. So then he filled it with water. Well, decomposed granite makes the water look kind of cloudy. And so he left. He went off duty the next day. So we went in and finished digging the 8-foot hole and filled it full of water. And like I said, it could have been very disastrous. When Duffy came back, the captain said, hey, go finish digging that hole back there. So Duffy went out, and the battalion chief and the captain and all the guys were all in the kitchen watching him. And he picked up the shovel, and instead of sticking it down to see what it was doing, he had to put on fireman's boots, which were open at the top. He put his foot on the shovel and went like this, and whoop. And it was really bad. We were laughing so hard we didn't realize that the guy's drowning. So we finally ran out there, and we grabbed his hands, and we pulled him up, and his boots stayed in the muck down below. So he would have died if we wouldn't have done that. And his answer was, man, that water really worked good.
That was great. Thank you all. This has been as always, I love these panels. We've done, I think, 5 of them. This is the first one we've done on public safety. Next year we'll be doing police, and I know they're not going to be as good as you guys, but I did get a lot of guff from a couple of retired chiefs in town that were upset that they weren't going first. But I said, hey, you guys have trucks and probably better stories. So anyway, I'd like to thank our sponsors today, the city of Krona, and I didn't introduce our mayor of Krona, Karen Spiegel's here. City assists us with this, though we are a tenant in the building, they allow us to use this space, and graciously we're very happy for that. And also videoing today is Sal and Jean Gonzalez. Thank you so much. This video will be edited and put on our YouTube channel, so if there's anybody that couldn't come today, you can refer them there, and they can certainly catch up. And my board of directors that works really hard on these things together, thank you all very much. And Ray Russell, thank you. I think I met Ray. I didn't have any idea who he was. Probably about a year ago, and he's talking to me and starts asking me questions, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? Why is he asking me all these questions? And then Fred comes over and tells me who he is, and then we've talked several times since. And when we first saw this idea, he was one of the first people I thought of, and I'm really happy to see him here. And again, also thank you for bringing all the amazing things over. If you haven't had a chance, please take a look at them before you leave. And finally, our panel. Thank you very much for Fred worked hard on this. And I know he sent you a ton of questions, and I loved all your answers, and it's great. Thank you all. A big round of applause for these. And just to give a pitch for, I'm sorry, yes ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've enjoyed this so much, and I have to tell you, my maiden name was Leslie Johnson. So obviously, Jim Johnson is my dad. And I was very, very proud of everything that you said about him. And he really enjoyed his 15 years with the city. And I'm very proud of all the accomplishments that he made. He took the city from one fire station to 4 with a 5th one on the way. So, and took the red trucks to white trucks. So, but thank you very much. He would have been here today, but he's in Laughlin.
Hey, smart man, trying to make some money. Thank you all, thank you for coming and thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Last little pitch for our society. We exist on donations alone. If you haven't joined and how you heard about us, actually Mary asked me to ask this. Those of you that heard about the event through Facebook, raise your hand. It's a good idea. Through the Sentinel, raise your hand. Okay. And what was the other one, Mary?
Press Enterprise.
Press Enterprise. Okay, we got a few there. Okay, great. It allows us to kind of help.
Newsletter.
And the Inner Circle, the newsletter, through the city. The newsletter if you're a member. Thank you. It allows us to kind of help our advertising for our next tour. And I also want to give a pitch for our Vintage Home Tour this year. It's going to be on May 12th. So please, we'll advertise them all in the same places, and we'll hope to see you there. There's snacks in the back. Please help yourselves. And again, if you'd like to join the society, there's a table at the back that Tricia will be manning, and it's only $20 a year, so we appreciate it. And there's also citrus labels that if you'd like, I think they're $7 a piece or 5 for 25. Is that right, Mary? Okay. And again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you.